private jet hummed through the night sky at 40,000 feet. I stood near the galley in my driver's uniform, holding a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon. My polished shoes reflected the soft cabin lights. In the main seating area, Vivian Thorne laughed with two investment bankers from Blackthorn Capital. She wore a blood-red power suit, her blonde hair twisted into a tight chignon. A $10 billion deal danced in her eyes like a predator watching prey. Vivienne's voice sliced through the engine hum. "Driver, get over here, now!" I walked forward, balancing the bottle. Arthur Sterling, the silver-haired managing director, barely glanced at me. Benedict Shaw, younger and more arrogant, tapped his gold cufflinks against the armrest and smirked. To them, I was just the hired help, a nameless man in a cheap black suit. Vivienne gestured at the empty crystal glasses on the polished mahogany table. "Pour, and don't spill a drop. These gentlemen are finalizing the paperwork for my next-gen takeover. Tomorrow, I become the undisputed queen of the semiconductor industry." I uncorked the champagne with a quiet pop. The sound was like a starting pistol. I filled each glass with precision, the bubbles rising in perfect columns. Vivian watched my movements like a hawk. She said to the bankers, "You know, Lucas used to work at a coffee shop.
Now he drives me around.
I guess every empire needs its donkeys." She laughed, a sharp, glittering sound. Arthur Sterling joined in. "Well, at least the donkey knows how to serve champagne. Better than the last one who broke a bottle of Krug." Benedict Shaw leaned forward. "Vivian, about the regulatory hurdles, you're certain the Antitrust Committee won't interfere? I heard rumors that the Global Antitrust Committee's chairman has been unusually quiet, and the key patent for NextGen's chip technology is held by a licensing entity that nobody can trace." Vivian waved a dismissive hand. "The GAC chairman is a ghost.
Nobody knows who he is.
And the patent license? NextGen already has it. The seller assured me there's an automatic renewal clause. It's ironclad. Once I sign, that license transfers to Thorne Industries." My fingers tightened on the champagne bottle, but my face stayed blank.
"Ironclad?"
I almost laughed. The license was a sword hanging over her head, and I was the only one holding the thread. Vivian raised her glass.
"To victory."
"Tomorrow the world bows."
They clinked glasses.
She took a sip, and then fixed her cold blue eyes on me.
"What are you staring at, Lucas?"
"Did you think you'd get a taste? You're here to serve, not to dream." I set the bottle down and stepped back. "Nothing, Ms. Thorne." She stood up, her heels clicking on the cabin floor. She walked toward me, champagne flute in hand, the scent of her expensive perfume mixed with the wine. "Tomorrow, after the ink dries, my net worth will be 10,000 times your miserable existence. You'll still be wiping spills and holding doors. Maybe it'll keep you on as a janitor." Without warning, she raised the glass and hurled the champagne into my face. The liquid splashed across my eyes and nose, dripping down my chin. It soaked the collar of my white shirt, leaving a spreading stain. The cold shock made my skin prickle. Arthur and Benedict burst into laughter. "Looks like a wet rat," Benedict said. Vivian leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. "Face reality, you pathetic nothing. After I sign, you can take your things and sit in economy class on the way back. In fact, why wait? Go to the back now. Get out of my sight." She pointed toward the rear cabin door. I wiped my face with my sleeve, the champagne stinging my eyes. I didn't say a word. I turned and walked away, my footsteps steady. Behind me, I heard Vivian say, "God, the help are so sensitive. Pour him another glass and he'd probably cry." I reached the service area at the back of the plane. A flight attendant, Marcia, handed me a towel. She gave me a knowing look. "Sir, are you all right?" "Perfectly fine, Marcia," I said, dabbing my face. "Make sure the forward cabin gets anything they need. It'll be in the crew rest." I stepped into the small lavatory and locked the door. In the mirror, my gray eyes stared back, cold as ice. The champagne stains spread across my shirt like a badge of honor. I stripped off the ruined jacket and shirt. From my duffel bag, I pulled out a fresh navy blue shirt, tailored from Egyptian cotton. I put it on, buttoned it slowly. Then I retrieved a slim black phone from my pocket. The screen displayed a simple interface. Project Lockdown Standby. Target NextGen Technologies. Thorne Acquisition. Patent License AX9 suspended upon authorization. Antitrust review pending, one-tap activation. My thumb rested on the red button. Not yet. The plan required perfect timing. I would let her walk into that signing room, let her reach for the pen, and only then would I press it. The freeze would hit in milliseconds. The look on her face would be priceless. I switched off the screen and tucked the phone away, straightening my new shirt. I walked through the galley and up to the cockpit door. I knocked twice, then once. The door unlocked, and I slipped inside. The cockpit was dimly lit, full of glowing instruments. Captain Reynolds, a veteran pilot with silver hair, glanced back. "Evening, Chairman.
We're on schedule.
Well, land in nice at 0800 local.
Good, I said, settling into the jump seat behind him.
My pilot's uniform is on board?" "Yes, sir. Pressed and ready in the crew closet," Reynolds said. "Jake confirmed you want the left seat for the return flight?" I nodded. "It'll fly us back. By then, Miss Thorne won't be in any condition to complain about the service." Reynolds chuckled. "Heard the commotion earlier. She has no idea who she just drenched." "Ignorance is her luxury," I said. "It expires in 24 hours. I stayed in the cockpit for a few minutes, watching the stars outside the windshield. Then I returned to the rear cabin and sat down. I pulled out my real phone again. A message from my chief of staff, Lena, NextGen CEO on standby. He will receive the call at exactly 10:15 local time. Just as she reaches for the pen, the antitrust freeze notification is drafted. "One tap from you and it goes live." I typed back, "Hold until my signal." The moment I press, trigger the public statement. "I want the world to watch her fall." I put the phone away. From my bag, I took a small vial of instant coffee powder, my prop for the morning. I slipped it into my pocket. Tomorrow, I would spill coffee on my cheap driver's shirt right in front of her. She would mock the stain and I would let her. Then, when her fingers touched the pen, I would tap my phone and end it all. I leaned back in the jump seat and closed my eyes. The engines droned on. 24 hours. After dozing for a few hours, I felt the plane begin its descent. The cabin lights flickered. I stood, put on the cheap jacket over my fresh shirt, and prepared to play the servant again. The plane touched down smoothly at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport. As the engines wound down, I grabbed Vivienne's luggage from the hold. 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases and a makeup case. I carried them down the air stair. A black Rolls-Royce waited on the tarmac. Vivienne descended the stairs, flanked by Arthur and Benedict. She didn't look at me. "Lucas, put the bags in the trunk and get in the front."
You're driving us to the hotel.
Yes, Ms.
"Thorne," I said, my voice obedient. I loaded the luggage and slid into the driver's seat. The Rolls-Royce purred to life. During the drive along the glittering coastline, Vivienne spoke on her phone with the NextGen CEO. I listened to every word through the rearview mirror. She cooed into the phone, "Yes, Mr. Dufort, everything is set. The signing is at 10 a.m. sharp. I trust the patent license transfer documents are included. No last-minute surprises, I hope." I couldn't hear the CEO's response, but Vivienne's smile widened. "Excellent. You know, some people think the GAC chairman might block this. But as I told my team, he's a myth, a phantom. If he existed, we would have seen him by now." I suppressed a smile and kept my eyes on the road. "You'll see him soon enough, Vivienne. Up close." We pulled into the Hotel Negresco. I opened doors, hauled luggage to the presidential suite, and stood in the corner like furniture. Vivienne pointed to a small service room off the hallway. "You'll sleep there. Be ready at 6 a.m. Bring my coffee, black, no sugar. And don't be late." "Understood," I said. She gave me one last disdainful glance and shut her bedroom door. I entered the service room, which was little more than a closet with a cot. I didn't mind. I set my alarm for 5:30. Then I laid out the cheap white shirt I had worn earlier, now dry but still bearing the faint champagne mark. In the morning, I would put it on again and add a fresh coffee stain. The perfect disguise. I lay down on the cot, staring at the ceiling. The countdown in my mind ticked closer to 0. At 2 a.m., I stepped quietly out of the service room and onto the suite's private balcony. I dialed Lena. She answered on the first ring.
Chairman, all units are in place.
"The NextGen board has been notified that a major antitrust review will be triggered if Thorne signs. They are prepared to halt the ceremony. The press release is drafted. World media is standing by for the biggest corporate collapse of the year." I looked out at the moonlit Mediterranean. "And the patent license freeze will take effect the second you activate it. Without that license, NextGen's entire next-generation chip line is worthless. Thorne Industries will be hit with a $2 billion breakup fee for failure to close." I let out a slow breath. "Perfect. I'll see you after the signing." I ended the call and returned to my cot. This time, I slept deeply, dreaming of the look on her face when her empire crumbled. The alarm buzzed at 5:30. I sat up in the cramped service room, the morning light a pale stripe on the wall. I stretched, then pulled on the same champagne-stained shirt from the night before. It still smelled faintly of wine and humiliation. Perfect. I took the small vial of instant coffee from my pocket, poured a few granules into my palm, and mixed them with a splash of water from the sink. I dabbed the brown paste onto the front of the shirt, right over my chest. The stain spread like an ugly brown bloom. I shrugged on the cheap black jacket and stepped out. In the suite's marble kitchenette, I brewed a pot of black coffee, according to Vivian's precise instructions. Organic single-origin beans from some small farm in Ethiopia. Water heated to exactly 195 degrees. I poured the liquid into a white porcelain cup, set it on a silver tray, and walked to her bedroom door. I knocked softly. "Miss Thorne, your coffee." The door swung open. Vivian stood there in a cream silk robe, her blonde hair already sculpted into a sleek bob. Her cold blue eyes flicked from the cup to my face, then down to the huge coffee stain on my shirt. Her lips twisted.
You spilled coffee on yourself again?
"Are you 3 years old, Lucas?" I kept my head slightly bowed. "I apologize, Ms. Thorne. It was an accident." She snatched the cup off the tray. "Look at that stain. It's like a badge of incompetence. You know, I pay you to be invisible and competent. You're failing at both." She took a sip of her coffee, eyeing me over the rim. "After today, I don't think your services will be required any longer. I'll have a new driver by tonight, one who can handle a coffee cup." She turned and walked back toward her dressing table. "Be downstairs with the car in 20 minutes. And for God's sake, don't let any photographers see you like that. You'd embarrass the company." I retreated to the service room and closed the door. I stood still for a moment, letting her words wash over me. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the slim black phone. The screen glowed. Project Lockdown ready. Antitrust review and patent freeze pending activation. My thumb pressed the red button. The screen flashed. Antitrust review initiated. Target Thorne Industries. Next Gen Technologies acquisition. Patent license A X9 frozen effective immediately. Next Gen CEO will be notified automatically at 10:15 local time. GAC chairman override confirmed. Global media alert queued. A quiet chime sounded. The deed was done. The trap was set. I typed a quick message to Lena. Activated. Stand by. The reply came instantly. Understood, Chairman. The dominoes are falling. I pocketed the phone and walked out of the service room, still wearing the coffee-stained shirt.
No need to change now.
Let her mock me one last time. Her sneers were the fuel that would make the fire burn brighter. I took the elevator down to the underground parking garage and pulled the black Rolls-Royce around to the front entrance. A few minutes later, Vivian emerged from the hotel lobby, flanked by Arthur Sterling and Benedict Shaw. She wore a white power suit with diamond buttons, looking every inch the conquering queen. The morning sun glinted off her earrings. When she saw me standing by the car in the stained shirt, her expression turned to ice.
"I told you to change," she hissed.
"Are you deaf or just determined to humiliate me? I have no other shirt, Ms. Thorne," I said, my voice flat. She looked at Arthur and Benedict. "Can you believe this? The man I hired to drive me looks like a homeless barista." She waved a hand dismissively.
"Fine."
"Open the doors and don't say a word. Keep your stained shirt away from the cameras." I opened the rear door, and they slid into the plush leather seats. I took the driver's seat, adjusted the rearview mirror, and pulled smoothly into the street. As I drove along the Promenade des Anglais, the Mediterranean sparkling on our left, the three of them talked about the deal. Benedict asked, "Vivian, any last-minute nerves?" He tapped on his tablet. "None," she said confidently. "The lawyers have confirmed the patent license is solid. The GAC chairman is a ghost story. I've crushed bigger obstacles. After today, Thorne Industries controls 40% of the global chip market." Arthur nodded. "And the breakup fee is $2 billion if the deal fails for any reason on your side."
You're sure there's no exposure?
Vivian laughed. "There is zero chance of failure. I've done my homework. The only person who could stop this deal would need to be the GAC chairman himself, and since nobody knows who he is, I'm safe." I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. She looked at me and sneered. "What are you staring at, Stainman? Keep your eyes on the road." I turned my gaze forward and said nothing. My black phone sat in the center console. Screen dark, but I knew its timer was ticking. Benedict pulled up a news article on his tablet. "Listen to this. The Global Antitrust Committee has remained silent on the Thorne NextGen merger, despite its scale. Some analysts speculate the anonymous chairman may be waiting to strike." He looked at Vivian. "That's a little concerning." Vivian waved it off. "Anonymous chairman means no teeth. If he had power, he'd show his face. Hess probably some retired bureaucrat in a basement. Forget him." Arthur grunted. "Still, the licensing entity that owns the patent, Apex Licensing, is a black box. Nobody knows who's behind it." "Apex is a shell," Vivian said. "I don't care who's behind it as long as the license stays valid." "And it will." I turned the steering wheel smoothly, my face blank. Apex Licensing was my shell. I had built it years ago, long before I met Vivian. She had no idea that the invisible power she mocked was sitting 3 feet away. We arrived at the next-gen tower, a sleek glass building near the port. A red carpet had been rolled out, and dozens of reporters and photographers crowded behind velvet ropes. I stopped the car at the VIP entrance. A valet rushed to open the door. Vivienne stepped out, all smiles for the cameras. Arthur and Benedict followed. Before walking into the building, Vivienne turned back to me, leaning toward the open window.
Wait here, Lucas.
Don't move. When I come back, well, settle your severance. Perhaps I'll give you a stain remover as a parting gift. She laughed, and the 2 bankers joined in. Then she turned and walked into the tower, her heels clicking on the marble. I watched her go. Once the doors closed behind her, I didn't stay in the car. I stepped out, the stained shirt hidden under my jacket. I crossed the street to a small cafe with a view of a giant digital billboard that was showing a live feed from inside the signing room. I ordered an espresso and sat at an outdoor table, phone in hand. Lena had sent me a direct link to the internal security cameras. I put in an earpiece. The feed showed the grand conference room. Vivienne sat at the head of the table, signing some preliminary documents, her smile dazzling. The next-gen CEO, Henri Dufort, sat opposite, looking slightly nervous. A row of lawyers lined the walls. A text from Lena: Dufort's phone will ring in 42 minutes. The freeze is locked. Press conference draft is ready. Want to watch the meltdown live? I typed back. I wouldn't miss it. The cafe buzzed with locals and tourists. On a TV behind the counter, a news channel showed the next-gen tower and a headline: Thorn Industries set to seal $10 billion takeover. A waiter glanced at the screen and said to his coworker, "That woman is going to be richer than God." I took a sip of espresso, the bitter taste matching my mood. I glanced at the live feed again. Vivienne was now giving a short speech to the small group in the room, probably about her vision for the merged company. Her voice was strong, commanding. She looked invincible. My phone vibrated. Lena Dufort is sweating. He heard a rumor that the GAC might move today. Hess trying to call you, but we routed it to voicemail. I smiled. Let him sweat. Time ticked down. 10 minutes to 10:15. I watched Vivienne pick up the ceremonial pen. The whole world was watching. I put the earpiece in both ears and zoomed in on her face. 10:14. At 10:15 exactly, Dufort's assistant handed him a vibrating phone. He held up a hand, his face puzzled. He listened, and the color drained from his cheeks. He looked at Vivienne, then at the camera mounted in the corner, and I knew he was searching for me. On the feed, Dufort stood up, his voice trembling. Sorry, Miss Thorn. The deal is off. The patent license has been frozen by the licensing authority, and the Global Antitrust Committee has issued an emergency injunction. We have no choice but to terminate. Vivienne's pen clattered to the table. Her face went from shock to fury in a heartbeat.
What?
That's impossible.
Who authorized this?
Who is behind this?
Dufort shook his head. The GAC chairman. It's over. I leaned back in my chair, the coffee stain on my shirt a silent victory flag. The countdown had reached 0, and her empire had just collapsed. I settled my bill and walked back toward the Rolls-Royce. My phone buzzed. Vivienne's number. I let it ring. I didn't answer Vivienne's call. I let the phone vibrate in my hand until the screen went dark. Then I climbed back into the driver's seat of the Rolls-Royce and pulled away from the next-gen tower. The digital billboard across the street was already flashing breaking news. Thorn next-gen merger collapses, Antitrust Committee freezes deal. A photo of Vivienne's stunned face filled half the screen. I allowed myself one small, cold smile. I drove 5 blocks to a private parking garage beneath a luxury apartment building that Vivienne knew nothing about. This was my safe house in Nice, purchased years ago through a shell company. I parked the Rolls-Royce in a reserved spot and took the private elevator to the penthouse. Inside the apartment was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Mediterranean. I stripped off the coffee-stained shirt and the cheap black jacket. I threw them into the trash can. Good riddance. From a walk-in closet, I selected a charcoal gray Brioni suit, a white dress shirt with platinum cufflinks, and a pair of hand-polished Oxfords. I dressed slowly, deliberately savoring every button. When I looked in the mirror, the driver was gone. The chairman had arrived. My phone buzzed. Lena sent a report. Vivienne Thorn has left the next-gen building. Shez in shock. Arthur Sterling is trying to reach every contact he has. Benedict Shaw is already distancing himself. The breakup fee notice will be formally delivered to her suite at 6 p.m. local time. I typed back. Invite her to dinner. 8 p.m. Le Grand Jardin at Hotel Bellerose. Tell her the GAC chairman will be there. No name. Just the title. Lena replied instantly. Shell come. Shez desperate. I pocketed the phone and walked to the window. Below, the city of Nice glittered in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, Vivian Thorne was panicking, making frantic calls, trying to salvage a deal that was already dead. She had no idea that the man who would decide her fate was the same man she had drenched in champagne 12 hours earlier. The thought tasted better than any wine. At 7:30, a black Maybach pulled up to my building. I stepped inside and the driver, not me, this time took me to Hotel Bellerose, a Belle Epoque palace perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. Le Grand Jardin was the hotel's most exclusive restaurant, a glass-walled conservatory filled with orchids and candlelight. I had reserved the entire room for the evening. Only one table was set, a long mahogany slab with 4 chairs on one side and a single chair on the other. The throne, you could call it. I sat down in the single chair facing the empty seats. I ordered a glass of sparkling water and waited. At exactly 8 o'clock, the maitre d' opened the door and announced Ms. Vivian Thorne, Mr. Arthur Sterling, and Mr.
Benedict Shaw.
They walked in, and I watched their faces transform when they saw me. Vivienne stopped dead in her tracks. Her white power suit was still immaculate, but her eyes were red-rimmed, her lipstick slightly smeared. Arthur Sterling looked like he had aged 10 years in 6 hours. Benedict Shaw's arrogant smirk had vanished completely. Vivienne's voice came out as a strangled whisper.
Lucas, what the hell are you doing here?
Get out. This is a private meeting with the chairman. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I simply tilted my head and said, "Sit down, Vivienne. You're looking at him." The silence that followed was so heavy, I could almost feel it pressing against my eardrums. Vivienne's mouth opened and closed. Arthur took a step back, his face draining of color. Benedict dropped his leather briefcase, and the thud echoed through the room. Vivienne shook her head violently.
No.
No, you're the driver. You're nobody. You pour champagne and spill coffee on your shirt. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather case. I flipped it open and placed it on the table in front of her. Inside was a gold badge embossed with the seal of the Global Antitrust Committee and the word chairman in raised letters. Beneath the badge was my identification card, complete with a hologram that shifted in the candlelight. Vivienne stared at the badge like it was a snake. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into the nearest chair. Arthur steadied himself on the back of a chair but didn't sit. Benedict remained frozen near the door. I picked up the badge and let the candlelight play across its surface. The Global Antitrust Committee has been watching your acquisition for 6 months. Every document you filed, every regulatory loophole you tried to exploit, I saw it all, from the inside. Because I hired you, Vivienne. I arranged for your company to become the lead bidder, just so I could watch you hang yourself. She found her voice ragged and broken.
You hired me?
That's impossible. Thorne Industries is mine. I built it from the ground up. No, I said, leaning forward. You built it on a foundation of debt, aggressive litigation, and stolen intellectual property. The only reason you survived this long is because I allowed it. I wanted to see how high you could climb before I cut the rope. Arthur Sterling finally spoke, his voice trembling. This is highly irregular. The chairman of the GAC cannot also be the owner of the blocking patent. That's a conflict of interest. I turned my gaze on him and he flinched. Mr. Sterling, I don't just own the blocking patent. I own Apex Licensing. I am the sole holder of the AX9 technology that NextGen depends on. I created that patent 10 years ago, long before Vivienne even knew what a semiconductor was. And as chairman of the GAC, I have the legal authority to block any merger that threatens market competition. There is no conflict. There is only power. I picked up a tablet from the table and swiped the screen.
Let me show you something.
This is the real-time status of Vivienne Thorne's corporate holdings. I turned the tablet so they could see. As of 6 p.m., today the breakup fee of $2 billion has been formally triggered. Thorne Industries stock has dropped 47% in after-hours trading. Your board of directors has already scheduled an emergency meeting to vote you out. And your personal assets, the penthouse in Manhattan, the villa in Tuscany, the yacht, are all collateral for loans you cannot repay. Vivienne's face was the color of old paper. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. You can't do this. I'll fight it. I have lawyers. I have connections. Your lawyers are already drafting their resignation letters, I said. Your connections have stopped returning your calls. You are radioactive, Vivienne.
Nobody will touch you.
I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. The three of them stared up at me like children caught in a storm. I walked around the table and stopped directly behind Vivienne's chair. I leaned down, my voice low and calm beside her ear. You once told me that after you signed, your net worth would be 10,000 times my miserable existence. Now your net worth is negative $2 billion. And mine? I straightened up and let the question hang in the air. Arthur Sterling pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking.
I need to call my office.
I need to distance our firm from this disaster. I gestured toward the door. You're free to leave, Mr. Sterling, but know this Blackthorn Capital's involvement in this merger has been noted. Your firm will be under review by the committee for the next 18 months. Any deals you touch will be scrutinized to the bone. Consider your career in mergers and acquisitions effectively over. Arthur's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the marble floor. He didn't bend to pick it up. He just walked out of the room like a ghost. Benedict Shaw had not moved from his spot near the door. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and confusion. I don't understand.
You served us champagne last night?
You had a stain on your shirt this morning.
Why would someone with your power pretend to be a servant?
I walked over to him, and he pressed his back against the wall, because I wanted to see what kind of people you really are. When you thought I was nobody, you laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like furniture. You revealed your true characters. And now I know exactly who deserves to be crushed. Benedict swallowed hard. What happens to me? You walk out of here. You resign from Blackthorn Capital before the end of the week, and you spend the rest of your career in a small regional office handling local real estate deals. If I ever see your name on a major transaction again, I will personally ensure you never work in finance again.
Are we clear?
He nodded frantically and practically ran out the door. Now only Vivian remained. She was still sitting at the table, staring at the gold badge like it might disappear if she blinked hard enough. I walked back to my seat and sat down across from her. The candlelight flickered between us. You poured champagne on my face last night, I said quietly. You called me a wet rat. You told me to roll to the back of the plane like a piece of luggage. She looked up, her eyes wet but furious. You humiliated me on purpose. You set me up. Yes, I said simply, and I would do it again. Every drop of champagne, every sneer, every insult, I collected them like receipts. Tonight, you're paying the bill. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a single-page document. I slid it across the table. This is a consent decree. Sign it, and I will allow Thorn Industries to enter structured bankruptcy under court supervision. You will lose control of the company, but the employees will keep their jobs, and the creditors will get partial repayment. Refuse to sign, and I will pursue a full criminal investigation into your fraudulent filings with the Securities Commission. You will face prison time, Vivian. She stared at the document, her hands trembling. You wouldn't. I leaned back in my chair. Try me. She picked up the pen, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mixing with her ruined mascara. She signed her name with a jagged, broken stroke and shoved the document back toward me. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my jacket. Thank you. Dinner is over. I stood up and walked toward the door. Behind me, Vivienne's voice cracked like a whip. This isn't over, Lucas. I'll find a way back.
You can't destroy me that easily.
I paused at the door and turned my head just enough for her to see my profile. You're right. I haven't finished destroying you yet. There is more to come. I stepped into the hallway and let the door swing shut behind me. The sound of her sobbing was the last thing I heard before the heavy oak sealed her. I left Hotel Bellerose and climbed into the waiting Maybach. I gave the driver an address, and we glided through the streets of Nice toward the airport. The night air was cool, and the Mediterranean glittered under a crescent moon. I pulled out my phone and called Captain Reynolds. He answered on the first ring. Chairman, the Gulfstream is fueled and ready. I have your uniform on board as requested. Are we flying tonight?
Yes, I said.
But I'll be taking the left seat. You can ride in the jump seat if you like, or take a commercial flight back to New York. Your choice, he chuckled. I'll ride along. Wouldn't miss this for the world, sir.
By the way, Miss.
Thorn's security detail just called the FBO. Shez booked the plane for an unscheduled departure in 2 hours. She's running. I allowed myself a cold smile. Perfect. Let her run. Well be waiting. The Maybach dropped me at the private aviation terminal. I walked through the VIP lounge, nodded to the attendant, and strode across the tarmac toward my Gulfstream G650. The plane gleamed under the floodlights, the stair door open and waiting. I climbed aboard, and Captain Reynolds handed me a garment bag. Your uniform, sir. I had it pressed. I unzipped the bag in the forward cabin. Inside was a crisp pilot's uniform, white shirt with 4 gold stripes on the epaulettes, navy blue trousers, and a fitted jacket with the wings embroidered over the left chest. I changed quickly, the fabric settling on my shoulders like a second skin. Flying had always been my escape, long before I became the chairman. I held an airline transport pilot certificate with type ratings on half a dozen jets. The Gulfstream was my favorite. I walked into the cockpit and settled into the left seat. The instrument panel glowed with soft amber and green lights. I ran through the pre-flight checks, my fingers moving across switches and dials with practiced ease. Reynolds took the jump seat behind me. "Shell be here within the hour," he said. Her driver just confirmed pickup from the hotel. I nodded and pulled out my phone. I sent one final message to Lena: initiate phase 3. Freeze all her personal accounts. The penthouse, the yacht, the cars, everything. I want her to arrive at this airplane with nothing but the clothes on her back. The reply came instantly. Done. Her credit cards just declined at the hotel. She threw a lamp at the front desk manager. I put the phone away and stared out at the runway lights. The countdown to the final confrontation had begun. 45 minutes later, a black sedan screeched to a halt on the tarmac near the Gulfstream. Through the cockpit window, I watched Vivian burst out of the back seat, still wearing the white power suit from the signing. Her hair had come loose from its chignon, hanging in tangled strands around her face. She had no luggage, no handbag, just a phone clutched in her hand. She ran toward the plane, her heels clattering on the asphalt. The cabin door was open, the stairs extended. She scrambled up them, gasping for breath. I heard her shout from the main cabin, "Take off. Now! Get this plane in the air. I don't care about clearance, just go." The flight attendant Marcia replied calmly, Sorry, Ms. Thorne, but the captain has not yet given the order for departure." "Then tell the captain to get moving." Vivienne screamed, the owner of this plane, and am ordering you to take off." Marcia's voice remained perfectly steady. "The plane's ownership was transferred approximately 20 minutes ago, ma'am. The new owner is in the cockpit. Perhaps you should speak with him directly." A pause, then the sound of high heels stomping toward the cockpit door. She pounded on it with her fist. "Open this door? Whoever you are, open it now. I have rights."
I have lawyers.
I reached up and unlatched the cockpit door. It swung open slowly, revealing the flight deck bathed in instrument light. Vivian stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury and desperation. When she saw me sitting in the captain's seat, wearing the uniform with the 4 gold stripes, the fury drained away. What replaced it was pure, undiluted terror. She took a stumbling step backward. No, it's you. It's always been you." I unbuckled my harness and stood up, filling the cockpit doorway. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the GAC chairman's badge again. The gold caught the light and seemed to burn in the dim cabin. "You asked to see the captain," I said. "Here I am." The captain. The chairman. The patent holder. The man you poured champagne on. And the man who just erased your entire empire with a single phone call. Vivienne's legs buckled, and she grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. "Please, Lucas. Whatever you want. I'll give it to you. Just let me go. Let me keep something. Anything." I stepped past her into the main cabin. She stumbled after me like a broken puppet. I walked to the leather conference chair, the same chair she had sat in the night before, when she told me to roll to the back of the plane. I sat down and crossed my legs. She stood before me, shaking, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You spent 10 years climbing the corporate ladder," I said. 10 years of backstabbing, lying, cheating, and crushing anyone who got in your way. You built Thorne Industries on a mountain of broken contracts and ruined lives. And you thought you were untouchable? I leaned forward. "But here's the truth, Vivian. You were never the queen. You were a piece on my board. Every promotion, every acquisition, every victory, I allowed it. I watched you climb because I knew the higher you rose, the harder you would fall. And tonight you fell so far that you'll never get up again." She dropped to her knees on the carpeted floor. The powerful woman who had dominated boardrooms and intimidated entire industries was now a sobbing wreck at my feet. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do anything. I'll sign anything.
Just don't take everything."
I reached into my jacket and pulled out another document. The final transfer of ownership for Thorne Industries. I had prepared it months ago. I placed it on the table beside me, along with a pen. "Sign this," I said. "It transfers all remaining voting shares and intellectual property to a holding company I control. In exchange, I will allow you to keep a small trust fund, enough to live modestly for the rest of your life. Refuse and I will activate the criminal investigation. You'll spend the next decade in a federal prison." She crawled toward the table, her hands trembling. She didn't read the document. She didn't argue. She just grabbed the pen and scrawled her signature on the bottom line. When she finished, she dropped the pen and collapsed onto the carpet, sobbing. I picked up the document and examined the signature. Then I folded it and tucked it into my jacket. "Thank you for your cooperation. Now, let's discuss your travel arrangements." I stood up and walked to the cabin door. I pressed a button, and the stairs lowered with a hydraulic hiss. Outside, a black security van had pulled up on the tarmac. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, holding tablets. "These gentlemen are from the Global Antitrust Committee's Enforcement Division," I said. "They will escort you back to the terminal."
You have a commercial flight to New York in 3 hours.
"Economy class, I believe you once told me that's where I belonged. Now it's your turn." Vivienne looked up from the floor, her face a ruin of tears and rage. "You're a monster." I crouched down so my eyes were level with hers. "No, Vivienne. I'm the man you created. Every insult, every humiliation, every time you told me I was nothing, you were forging the weapon that would destroy you." I just pulled the trigger. I straightened up and nodded to the enforcement agents. They climbed the stairs and gently lifted Vivienne to her feet. She didn't resist. She walked down the stairs like a woman in a trance, her expensive heels slipping on the metal steps. The agents guided her into the back of the van, and the door slid shut. I stood at the top of the air stair, watching the van drive away into the night. The runway lights stretched out into the darkness like a path to another world. Captain Reynolds appeared beside me.
What now, Chairman?
I turned and walked back into the cabin. "Now I fly this plane back to New York. And tomorrow morning, I walk into Thorn Industries headquarters and sit in the chair that used to be hers. Her empire is mine now." I settled back into the cockpit, buckled my harness, and began the engine start sequence. The turbines whined to life, smooth and powerful. I contacted the tower and received clearance for takeoff. As the Gulfstream accelerated down the runway, I thought about the day I first met Vivienne, the day she interviewed me for the driver position, never bothering to check my background. She had seen a nobody. She had hired a hurricane. The plane lifted off and I banked west toward the Atlantic. Behind me, the lights of Nice faded into the darkness. Ahead lay New York, and a corner office that no longer belonged to Vivienne Thorn. My phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "Media coverage is exploding. Global headlines, anonymous chairman revealed. Thorn empire collapses overnight. Your face is everywhere. The world knows who you are now." I typed back. "Good.
Let them know.
It's time to stop hiding." I switched off the phone and concentrated on the stars ahead. Somewhere in economy class, Vivienne was discovering what it felt like to be nobody. And somewhere in Manhattan, a boardroom waited for its new king. The night was quiet, the engines purred, and I flew on. The Gulfstream touched down at Teterboro Airport just past 3 in the morning. I taxied to the private hangar, shut down the engines, and sat in the cockpit for a long moment. The instrument lights flickered off one by one. Outside, the New York skyline glowed against the black sky, a constellation of ambition and steel. Somewhere in that city, Vivienne Thorn was landing at JFK in an economy seat. Her empire gone, her name in ruins. Captain Reynolds clapped me on the shoulder. "Nice landing, Chairman." Smooth as silk. I unstrapped and stood.
Thanks, Reynolds.
"Take a few days off."
You've earned it.
I changed out of the pilot's uniform and back into the charcoal Brioni suit. When I stepped off the plane, a black Escalade waited on the tarmac.
My driver, a quiet ex-Marine named Davis, opened the door.
I slid into the back seat, and we pulled away toward Manhattan. My phone buzzed with a video file from Lena. The subject line read, "Signing room footage, global broadcast version."
I pressed play.
The video was shot from a fixed camera positioned at the back of the next-gen conference room. I watched Vivienne Thorn in her white power suit, diamond buttons catching the light, leaning forward to accept the ceremonial Mont Blanc pen from an assistant. She was smiling, that same victorious smile I had seen on the plane just 30 hours earlier. The caption on the bottom of the screen read, "Thorn Industries CEO set to acquire NextGen in historic $10 billion deal." I watched her fingers touch the pen. I watched her lean toward the document. And then I watched Henri Dufort's assistant rush to his side, phone pressed against her palm. Dufort's face shifted from professional courtesy to alarm to horror in a span of 3 seconds. He raised his hand, palm out, and the room froze. On the video, Dufort's voice cracked through the silence. "I am so sorry, Miss Thorn. The deal is terminated. The patent license has been frozen by the licensing authority. The Global Antitrust Committee has issued an emergency injunction. There is nothing we can do." Vivienne's smile didn't disappear immediately. It clung to her face for a terrible, stretched-out moment, like a photograph curling in a fire. Then it crumbled. Her jaw went slack. The pen slipped from her fingers and rolled across the polished table, leaving a thin trail of black ink. She snatched at it, fumbled, and the pen dropped to the marble floor with a sound like a gavel striking.
That's impossible.
Her voice came out shrill, cracking at the edges. "There has to be a mistake. Call the committee. Call the licensing authority."
Someone get me a phone.
But nobody moved. The lawyers along the wall were already closing their briefcases. Arthur Sterling had his head in his hands. Benedict Shaw was staring at his phone with an expression of pure disbelief. The next-gen board members were rising from their seats, avoiding Vivienne's frantic gaze. She slammed her palm on the table. This deal is ironclad. I have contracts.
I have signatures. You cannot just walk away.
Dufort shook his head slowly. He looked genuinely sorry, but there was something else in his expression too. A flicker of relief, maybe. Ms. Thorne, the injunction comes from the chairman himself. The patent license suspension is non-negotiable. Without that license, NextGen's core technology is worthless. The merger is dead. We have no choice but to invoke the breakup clause. The breakup clause. $2 billion. I watched Vivienne's face as those 3 words hit her bloodstream. Her carefully applied makeup could not hide the sudden gray pallor that spread beneath her skin. Her lips moved soundlessly. Her hands, which had commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors, trembled like dry leaves in a windstorm. Then she looked at the camera, not the one recording for the news feed. A smaller camera mounted high in the corner, almost invisible. My camera. The one I had installed months ago, when I first set this trap. She stared directly into the lens, and for one strange moment, it felt like she was staring at me. Who did this? She whispered.
Who is the chairman?
Someone tell me his name. No one answered. The room emptied around her. Arthur Sterling walked out without looking back. Benedict Shaw practically sprinted for the exit. The lawyers evaporated. Only Dufort remained for a moment longer, standing awkwardly at the head of the table. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I am sorry. I have never met the chairman.
Nobody has.
But his authority is absolute. There is no appeal. He left. Vivienne was alone in the conference room, standing beside the unsigned contract. Her reflection multiplied in the polished walls. She raised her hands and pressed them against her temples. Then she let out a scream, raw, guttural, the sound of something breaking that could never be fixed. She grabbed the contract, a thick stack of paper bound in a leather folder, and hurled it across the room. Pages scattered like wounded birds. She swept her arm across the table, sending water glasses and pens crashing to the floor. Her diamond earring caught on the tablecloth and tore free, skittering into a corner. She didn't notice. Her perfect chignon had come apart, blonde hair spilling over her shoulders. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and her red lipstick smeared across her cheek like a battle wound. The camera kept recording. She stumbled toward the window and pressed her forehead against the glass, staring down at the street below. A crowd of reporters had gathered, their cameras pointed up at the tower like vultures waiting for a dying animal. The breaking news chirons were already rolling. Merger collapses, Thorne Industries in freefall, mystery chairman blocks billion-dollar deal. Vivienne's phone buzzed on the table. She lurched toward it, hope flickering in her eyes. She looked at the screen and went completely still. I knew what she was seeing, because Lena had sent me the same notification. Her personal accounts had been frozen. Every credit card, every bank account, every line of credit, all of it, gone. She was standing in a billion-dollar conference room with exactly $0 to her name. She dropped the phone. It clattered on the marble floor, screen cracking. She followed it down, her knees hitting the hard stone. Her white power suit pooled around her like a collapsed tent. She stayed there on her knees, staring at nothing, while her reflection stared back from the polished floor. I stopped the video and set my phone aside. We were crossing the George Washington Bridge now, the Hudson River a dark ribbon below. I felt no pity. Every tear she shed tonight was a down payment on the years of cruelty she had inflicted on everyone around her. The champagne on my face was just the last drop in a very deep ocean. Davis pulled the Escalade into the underground garage of my building. I took the private elevator to the penthouse and stepped into my home. It was quiet, the windows looking out over Central Park. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at my desk. A stack of documents waited for me, the final transfer paperwork for Thorne Industries, now signed by Vivienne herself. Her signature was shaky but legal. The company was mine. Lena called at 6 a.m. Chairman, the morning headlines are brutal. The Wall Street Journal is calling it the most dramatic corporate collapse in a decade. Vivienne's face is on every front page. The SEC has opened a preliminary inquiry into her filings. And I just got word from the hotel in Nice. She checked out at 4 a.m. after her credit cards were declined. She apparently threw a glass at the front desk manager. Where is she now? On a commercial flight somewhere over the Atlantic. Coach. Middle seat. She tried to use her miles to upgrade, but the airline system flagged her account as frozen. The flight attendant made her move back. I allowed myself a small cold smile.
Good.
Keep tracking her. I want to know the moment she lands. Understood. Also, your 10 a.m. meeting at Thorn headquarters is confirmed. The board will be assembled. They're terrified, by the way. Most of them are already drafting their resignations. Tell them to hold off, I said. I'll decide who stays and who goes. I hung up and stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the East River. In a few hours, I would walk into the building that Vivian Thorn had ruled for a decade. I would sit in her chair. I would open her files. I would dismantle everything she had built and rebuild it in my own image. But first, I had one more thing to collect. I arrived at Thorn Industries headquarters at 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the board meeting. The building was a 60-story glass tower on Park Avenue, its lobby decorated with abstract sculptures and a massive LED screen that usually displayed stock tickers and corporate propaganda. Today, the screen was dark. Davis opened the door and I stepped out of the Escalade. I wore a navy blue three-piece suit with a white pocket square and my JAC chairman's badge pinned discreetly to the inside of my lapel. I walked through the revolving doors and into the lobby. A security guard moved to intercept me, but my chief of staff, Lena, was already there, a slim woman in a gray pantsuit with a tablet in her hand.
Mr.
Chairman, she said loudly enough for the security team to hear. The board is assembled in the executive conference room on the 60th floor. Ms. Thorne's office has been secured. Her personal effects are being inventoried. The security guard froze, his hand halfway to his radio. I gave him a brief nod and kept walking. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, and Lena followed. The doors closed. We ascended in silence, the floor numbers ticking upward. At the 60th floor, the doors opened onto a reception area of white marble and soft gray furniture. A receptionist sat behind a curved desk, her face pale and nervous. When she saw me, she stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Sir, Mr. Chairman, welcome. The board is inside. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, anything at all? No, thank you, I said. I'm not thirsty. I walked past her toward the double doors of the executive conference room. They were made of frosted glass with Thorn Industries logo etched into the surface, a stylized thorn vine wrapping around a globe. Soon, that logo would be gone. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The room was long and narrow, dominated by a single table of polished black granite. 15 board members sat around it, all of them wearing the shell-shocked expressions of people who had seen their stock options evaporate overnight. At the head of the table was an empty chair, Vivienne's chair, a high-backed leather throne that she had custom-ordered from Italy. I walked toward it without hesitation. A few board members started to rise, then froze halfway, unsure of the protocol. I pulled out Vivienne's chair and sat down. The leather was still warm from the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Good morning, I said.
My name is Lucas Grant.
I am the chairman of the Global Antitrust Committee. I am the sole owner of Apex Licensing, which holds the AX9 patent that NextGen requires to operate. And as of 3 o'clock this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Thorn Industries, controlling 51% of the voting stock. Silence. A few board members exchanged glances. One of them, a silver-haired woman named Patricia Coldwell, who had been Vivienne's mentor years ago, raised her hand tentatively. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Grant, we need to understand what happened. Vivienne Thorn is the founder of this company. She holds 30% of the equity. How did you acquire a majority stake overnight? I pulled the signed transfer document from my briefcase and placed it on the table. Ms. Thorn transferred her shares to me voluntarily last night. She signed this document in my presence aboard my aircraft. The transfer is legally binding and has been filed with the SEC. Patricia's face went pale. Voluntarily? Vivienne would never give up her shares voluntarily. She was given a choice, I said. Sign the transfer and retain a modest trust fund, or face a full criminal investigation into her fraudulent filings. She made the rational decision. A murmur rippled around the table. One of the younger board members, a man named Derek Flynn, leaned forward aggressively. This is hostile. This is extortion. We could challenge this in court. I turned my gaze on him, and he wilted visibly. Mr. Flynn, you are welcome to hire any attorney you like. But before you do, you should know that I have spent 2 years documenting every illegal or unethical action this company has taken under Vivienne's leadership. I have emails, recordings, and signed affidavits from former employees who were bullied into silence. If this transfer is challenged in court, all of that evidence becomes public. Thorn Industries will not survive the scandal. I let the words hang in the air. Patricia Coldwell slowly removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. Derek Flynn slumped back in his chair. The fight drained out of the room like air from a punctured tire. I continued. This is not a hostile takeover.
This is a mercy.
I'm offering you the chance to preserve this company under new leadership. I will install a new CEO. I will restructure the board. I will negotiate a settlement with the SEC that keeps the criminal investigation focused on Vivienne alone. In exchange, you will cooperate fully with my transition team. Anyone who resists will be removed immediately. Patricia raised her hand again. And what happens to Vivienne? I leaned back in the leather chair, the same chair she had sat in for a decade, planning her conquests and sharpening her knives. Vivienne Thorne is finished. Her assets are frozen. Her reputation is destroyed. She will face civil penalties and possibly criminal charges depending on how cooperative she chooses to be. She will never work in this industry again. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Patricia nodded slowly.
What do you need from us? Your resignations, I said.
Every one of you. You can submit them to Lena by the end of the day. Some of you will be asked to stay on in reduced roles during the transition. Most of you will not. This board oversaw a regime of bullying, fraud, and regulatory evasion. You are all complicit to some degree. Consider your resignations an act of contrition. One by one, the board members nodded. There was no fight left in any of them. Patricia Coldwell was the first to stand. She walked around the table and extended her hand. I served on this board for 8 years. I knew Vivienne was ruthless, but I never knew how bad it really was. Maybe I didn't want to know. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I stood and shook her hand.
Thank you, Ms.
Coldwell.
I will remember your cooperation. She left and the others followed, a slow procession of defeated executives. When the last one had gone, Lena stepped into the room with her tablet. The news conference is in 1 hour, she said. Every major financial network will be there. Global press coverage is confirmed.
What do you want to say?
I stood up and walked to the window. 60 stories below, the streets of Manhattan teemed with people who had no idea that an empire had just changed hands.
I want to announce the new ownership.
I want to tell the world who I am. No more anonymity. Lena, it's time for the ghost to show his face. Lena nodded and began typing on her tablet. I'll prepare a statement. Anything else?
Yes.
Where is Vivienne now?
Lena checked her tracking app. Her flight landed at JFK 40 minutes ago. She's currently in a taxi. She had to borrow cash from a fellow passenger to pay the fare. She's heading to her apartment in Tribeca. I turned from the window. She won't get in. The locks were changed at 6 a.m. per my order. The building management has been notified. Lena's lips twitched in a small professional smile. That's going to be an unpleasant discovery. I walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Have someone from the enforcement division meet her there. Give her a copy of the asset seizure order. And Lena, make sure someone is recording. I took the private elevator down to the lobby. As I stepped out, my phone buzzed with a live video feed from Lena. She had patched into the building's security cameras in Tribeca. I watched the screen as I walked toward the Escalade. The video showed a taxi pulling up in front of a luxury apartment building. Vivienne stumbled out, her white power suit wrinkled beyond recognition, her hair a tangled mess. She had no luggage, no purse, just the clothes on her back and a cracked phone in her hand. She walked up to the entrance and pressed her key fob against the reader. Nothing happened. She pressed it again.
Nothing.
She buzzed the intercom. A voice answered, the building manager. Sorry, Ms. Thorne, but your lease has been terminated. Your belongings will be shipped to a storage facility. You are not permitted to enter the building.
Vivienne screamed at the intercom, her voice raw and desperate.
This is my home.
I own this apartment.
You can't do this.
The intercom went silent. She pounded on the glass door with her fists. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, and 2 enforcement agents in dark suits stepped out. One of them held a thick envelope.
Ms.
Thorne, the agent said, his voice flat and official. This is a court-ordered asset seizure. All properties, vehicles, and financial accounts registered in your name have been frozen pending investigation by the Global Antitrust Committee. You are entitled to legal representation. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them? Vivienne stared at the envelope like it was a snake. She didn't take it. The agent placed it gently on the hood of the taxi and stepped back. She turned in a slow circle on the sidewalk, her ruined suit catching the morning breeze, her bare feet now visible. She had lost her heels somewhere, maybe on the plane, maybe in the chaos. Her face was a mask of devastation, her lipstick still smeared across her cheek. A few passers-by stopped to stare. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. She looked up at the building that had once been her castle. Then she looked at the camera mounted above the entrance. My camera, I realized, because I owned the security system now. She stared directly into the lens, just as she had done in the next-gen conference room. Her lips moved, and I could read the words even without sound. I will find him. I will make him pay.
I smiled and put the phone in my pocket.
She could look all she wanted. There was nothing left to find. I climbed into the Escalade, and Davis pulled away from the curb. The news conference was in 45 minutes. The world was about to meet the chairman, and Vivienne Thorne was about to discover that her nightmare was only beginning. The news conference was held in the ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel on Fifth Avenue. I chose the location deliberately. It was the same room where Vivienne Thorne had thrown her last corporate anniversary party, a black tea affair where she had introduced me to her colleagues as my driver, Lucas Hez Harmless. Now the crystal chandeliers would witness a different kind of introduction. I stood backstage, watching the room fill through a gap in the velvet curtain. Every major financial network had sent a crew. Bloomberg, CNBC, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal. Their cameras formed a solid wall at the back of the room. Reporters packed the seats, their phones glowing like fireflies in the dim light. The stage held a single podium with a microphone and a backdrop bearing the seal of the Global Antitrust Committee. A golden scale balanced on a sword. Lena appeared at my elbow. We're at capacity. 300 journalists in the room. Another 2,000 watching the live stream. Trending #1 on social media in 12 countries. The headline, "They're all running, Ghost Chairman steps into the light." I adjusted my cufflinks.
Good.
Let's give them something to remember. Lena handed me a small stack of note cards. Your opening statement is drafted, but you're free to improvise. Just remember, the SEC has observers in the room. Everything you say will be scrutinized. I tucked the cards into my jacket without looking at them. I didn't need a script. I had been waiting years for this moment. At exactly 10 o'clock, the lights dimmed and a single spotlight illuminated the podium. I walked out from behind the curtain and into the light. The cameras clicked and whirred like a swarm of mechanical insects. The room fell silent. I gripped the edges of the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Somewhere in that crowd, watching on a cracked phone screen in a borrowed taxi or a homeless shelter, was Vivienne Thorne. I wanted her to hear every word. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Lucas Grant. For the past 7 years, I have served as the anonymous chairman of the Global Antitrust Committee. Before that, I was the founder and sole owner of Apex Licensing, a company that holds critical patents in the semiconductor industry. And as of 6 o'clock this morning, I am the majority shareholder and new CEO of Thorne Industries." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Reporters typed furiously on their laptops. Camera operators zoomed in on my face. I let the noise build for a moment before I raised my hand.
I know you have questions.
Let me tell you a story first. I stepped out from behind the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. The spotlight followed me. I wanted them to see me clearly, no shadows, no hiding. 3 years ago, I met a woman named Vivienne Thorne. She was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly ruthless. She had built a company worth billions by crushing competitors, exploiting regulatory loopholes, and treating everyone around her like disposable tools. When I met her, she needed a driver, so I applied for the job. A few reporters laughed nervously. Unsure if this was a joke, I let them sit with the discomfort. For 3 years, I drove her to meetings. I carried her luggage. I poured her champagne. I wore cheap suits with coffee stains that she mocked at every opportunity. And all the while, I watched. I documented. I waited. Because I knew something she didn't know, that the anonymous chairman she feared and the invisible patent holder she couldn't trace were both the same. The man sitting behind the wheel of her Rolls-Royce. The room went absolutely still. I could hear the faint hum of the cameras. A reporter in the front row, a woman from the Financial Times, had her hand pressed over her mouth. 36 hours ago, on a private jet over the Atlantic, Vivienne Thorne threw champagne in my face. She told me I was nothing. She told me my net worth would never equal a fraction of hers. She told me to roll to the back of the plane like a piece of luggage. I paused, letting the silence stretch. This morning, Vivienne Thorne's net worth is negative $2 billion. Her company is mine. Her patents are mine. Her apartment locks were changed at 6 a.m. Her credit cards were declined at a hotel in Nice. She flew home in economy class middle seat because her miles account was frozen. And right now, as I speak, she is standing on a sidewalk in Tribeca with no shoes, no money, and no future. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions over each other. Camera flashes strobed like lightning. I raised my hand again, and the noise subsided. "I'm not telling you this to gloat," I said. "I'm telling you this because the world needs to understand how power really works." Vivienne Thorne believed she was invincible because she had money and influence. She believed she could treat people however she wanted, as long as she was winning. She forgot a simple truth. The people you step on today might be the people standing above you tomorrow. I walked back to the podium and gripped it with both hands. As of today, Thorn Industries will be restructured under new leadership. The culture of fear and exploitation that Vivienne Thorn built will be dismantled. The employees who were bullied and silenced will have a voice. The competitors she crushed through illegal tactics will have their day in court. And the Global Antitrust Committee will launch a full investigation into every deal she ever touched. A reporter near the middle of the room stood up without being called on.
Mr.
Grant, are you admitting that you used your position as chairman to pursue a personal vendetta? Isn't that an abuse of power? I looked directly at him.
What's your name?
He hesitated. Mark Chen, Wall Street Journal. Mr. Chen, let me be perfectly clear. Every action I took against Vivienne Thorn was legally justified and procedurally sound. The antitrust review was initiated based on documented violations of competition law. The patent license freeze was triggered by fraudulent transfer attempts. The asset seizure was approved by a federal judge. My personal history with Ms. Thorn does not invalidate the evidence against her. It simply explains why I was motivated to look closely enough to find it.
Another reporter jumped up.
What about the $2 billion breakup fee?
Who pays that?
Thorn Industries pays it, I said, to NextGen. The funds will come from the liquidation of Vivienne Thorn's personal assets, including her penthouse, her villa in Tuscany, her yacht, and her art collection. She will be left with nothing but a small trust fund enough to live modestly, as I promised her. A woman from Reuters raised her hand. I nodded toward her. Mr. Grant, where is Vivienne Thorn now?
Has she made any statement?
I allowed myself a thin smile. I believe she is currently trying to find a place to stay. Her last known location was the sidewalk outside her former apartment building in Tribeca. As for a statement, I suspect she'll make one eventually. I look forward to hearing what she has to say. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. I answered each one calmly, factually, without anger. I wanted the world to see not a vengeful ex-lover but a regulator doing his job. The truth, of course, was both, but I had learned from Vivienne herself that the best revenge is the one that looks like justice. At the end of the conference, I stepped away from the podium and walked toward the side exit. Lena fell into step beside me. Coverage is overwhelming, she said. Your face is on every screen in Times Square. The SEC just announced a formal investigation into Thorn Industries' past acquisitions, and the judge approved the final asset liquidation order. Shays officially broke chairman. I stopped at the exit and turned to look back at the empty stage. The spotlight had been switched off. The podium stood alone in the dark. Shays not broke yet, I said quietly. She still has one thing left. Her pride. And that's the one thing I plan to take personally. Lena raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She handed me a key. A small, tarnished brass key attached to a leather fob. The property is ready. I had it cleaned, but I left everything else exactly as it was. The ring is in the nightstand drawer, just like you said. I closed my fingers around the key. It was cold and heavy in my palm. Thank you, Lena. I'll handle this part myself. I walked out of the St. Regis and into the October sunshine. Davis was waiting with the Escalade, but I waved him off. I wanted to walk. The streets of Manhattan were crowded with lunch-hour traffic, and nobody recognized me yet. My face was famous, but it takes a few hours for fame to sink into the public consciousness. I walked 20 blocks north, past storefronts and coffee shops, past the luxury boutiques where Vivienne had once spent small fortunes on handbags and shoes. Eventually, I reached a narrow street in the East Village. The building was old, a 5-story walk-up with a crumbling facade and a rusted fire escape. I had lived here once years ago when I was nobody. When Vivienne and I first met, not the meeting she remembered, but the real one, the one that came before all the lies. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. The key turned in the lock with a familiar scrape. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The apartment was small, a studio with a single window facing a brick wall. A Murphy bed was folded against the wall. A 2-burner stove sat in the corner. The linoleum floor was cracked in places, and the radiator hissed and clanked like an old man coughing. I had lived here for 2 years while I built Apex licensing from scratch, surviving on instant coffee and ramen noodles while my patents made other people rich. Vivienne had never known about this place. She thought I had always been the driver, the servant, the nobody she could treat like furniture. But once, a very long time ago, she had been here. And she had left something behind. I walked to the nightstand beside the folded Murphy bed. The wood was cheap particle board, the veneer peeling at the corners. I pulled open the single drawer. Inside, resting on a bed of old receipts and expired subway cards, was a small velvet box. I picked it up and opened it. A diamond ring caught the light from the window. It wasn't enormous. A single carat, round cut, set in a platinum band. I had saved for 6 months to buy it, working double shifts at a coffee shop while I drafted patent applications at night. I had been 25 years old, poor and unknown, and I had been stupid enough to believe that love was enough. I sat down on the edge of the dusty mattress and stared at the ring. 5 years ago, I had brought Vivian to this apartment. She was not yet the corporate titan she would become, just a hungry junior executive with sharp elbows and a sharper tongue. We had met at a tech conference where I was demonstrating a prototype chip. She had seen the potential in my eyes, and I had seen the fire in hers. For 6 months, we were inseparable. She would come to this tiny apartment after work, kick off her expensive heels, and eat takeout Chinese food on the floor, because I didn't own a table. She would laugh at my jokes and tell me I was going to change the world. I believed her. On the night I proposed, I cooked her a terrible dinner, burned pasta and cheap wine from a corner bodega. She ate it without complaining, which was unusual for her even then. When I got down on one knee and opened the ring box, her eyes filled with tears. She said yes. She slid the ring onto her finger and kissed me like she meant it. I remember thinking that this was the happiest moment of my life. 3 days later, she was gone. No phone call, no note, just an empty apartment and a diamond ring left on the pillow. I found out later that she had accepted a job at a rival firm, a job that required her to be single and unattached, that demanded complete focus and zero distractions. She had chosen the corner office over me, and she had done it without a backward glance. The ring on the pillow was her only goodbye. I never confronted her about it. Instead, I used the pain as fuel. I finished my patent applications. I founded Apex Licensing. I caught the attention of the Global Antitrust Committee. I rose through the ranks until I became the anonymous chairman, the ghost in the machine. And all the while, I kept this apartment. I kept the ring. I kept the memory of what she had done to me, like a splinter under my skin that I never bothered to remove. Now, 5 years later, the ring still glinted in the dusty light. I closed the box and slipped it into my pocket.
My phone buzzed.
Lena again. Chairman Vivian Thorne just showed up at the Thorne Industries lobby. Shez demanding to see you. Security is holding her at the desk. I stood up and brushed the dust from my suit.
Let her wait.
I'll be there in 30 minutes. I took one last look around the tiny apartment. The Murphy bed.
The cracked linoleum.
The window facing a brick wall. This was where my story began. Now it was where Vivian's story would end. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and took a cab back to Park Avenue. When I arrived at Thorne Industries, the lobby was in chaos. A small crowd of employees had gathered near the security desk, whispering and pointing. At the center of the commotion stood Vivian Thorne. She looked like a woman who had crawled through 10 miles of broken glass. Her white power suit was gray with dirt and wrinkles. Her feet were wrapped in flimsy plastic bags, the best she could find to replace her lost heels. Her hair hung in matted ropes around her face. Her lipstick had been completely wiped away, leaving her lips pale and chapped. But her eyes still burned with that familiar fire, that furious defiance that had made her so dangerous and so compelling. When she saw me walk through the revolving doors, she lunged toward me. 2 security guards caught her arms and held her back. Lucas. Her voice was a raw screech, stripped of all its polished elegance. Lucas, we need to talk. You can't do this to me. We were together. We loved each other. I walked toward her slowly, my shoes clicking on the marble floor. The crowd parted around me like water around a stone. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to smell the stale airplane air and cheap taxi upholstery on her clothes. We were together 5 years ago, I said quietly. You left the ring on my pillow and disappeared without a word. You never mentioned it again. You pretended you didn't know me when you hired me as your driver. So don't talk to me about love, Vivian. She flinched as if I had slapped her. Her mouth opened and closed. For the first time, the fire in her eyes flickered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. I opened it and held it up so she could see the ring inside. The same ring, the one she had left on the pillow. The diamond caught the lobby lights and sparkled. I kept it, I said. All these years, I kept it as a reminder of what you did to me. Every time I felt weak, every time I wondered if I should show you mercy, I would look at this ring and remember. You made me who I am, Vivian. Your cruelty forged me into the weapon that destroyed you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her voice dropped to a broken whisper. I made a mistake. I was young. I was scared. I chose my career over you because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. Please, Lucas, please give me another chance. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had poured champagne on my face, who had called me a wet rat, who had told me I was nothing, she was begging now. Broken, penniless, ruined. It should have felt satisfying. And it did, in a cold, hollow way. But there was something else too, something I hadn't expected, the faintest trace of pity. I closed the ring box and put it back in my pocket. Then I stepped closer, So close that only she could hear my next words. I'm not going to give you another chance, Vivian, but I'm going to give you something else. The small trust fund I promised, it's real. You'll have enough to rent a modest apartment. You'll have enough to eat. You won't be homeless. That's more mercy than you ever showed me. She looked up at me, her tear-streaked face searching mine for some sign of weakness. Some crack she could exploit.
She found nothing.
What about the company? She whispered.
What about everything I built?
I stepped back and gestured at the lobby around us. The marble walls, the abstract sculptures, the dark LED screen that used to display her face. The company is mine now, and I'm going to do what you never could. I'm going to run it with integrity. No more exploitation. No more fraud. No more treating employees like disposable tools. Your legacy ends today. Mine begins. I turned to the security guards. Escort her out. She's not permitted on the premises. The guards lifted Vivian by her arms and began steering her toward the revolving doors. She didn't struggle. She didn't scream. She just walked, her plastic-wrapped feet shuffling on the marble floor. Her head bowed. At the doors, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. Her eyes met mine one last time.
You think you've won, she said.
But you'll always know that you got here because of me. I made you, Lucas. Every humiliation I put you through made you strong. You owe me. I didn't answer. I just watched as the guards pushed her through the doors and out onto the sidewalk. The revolving door spun once, twice, and then she was gone. Outside, a few paparazzi who had caught wind of the confrontation snapped photos of her stumbling down Park Avenue. Tomorrow, those photos would be on every gossip site in the world. Disgraced CEO begs in the street. From billionaire to broke. The fall of Vivian Thorne. I stood in the lobby for a long moment, the velvet box heavy in my pocket. Then I turned and walked toward the elevator. Lena was waiting, her tablet in hand. The board has submitted their resignations, she said.
All 15.
The transition team is ready to brief you, and the federal judge just unsealed the criminal referral. Vivian will be formally charged with securities fraud by the end of the week. I stepped into the elevator. Good.
What about the press?
They're running with the romantic angle. The ex-fiancé, the revenge plot, the ring. It's going to be the story of the year. Your approval ratings are through the roof, by the way. The public loves a good revenge story. The elevator doors closed, and I watched the floor numbers tick upward. The ring box pressed against my thigh through the fabric of my suit. 5 years of waiting. 5 years of planning. 5 years of letting her climb higher and higher just so the fall would be that much more devastating. And now it was done. But as the elevator rose toward the 60th floor, I felt something unexpected. Not emptiness. I had expected emptiness. Not regret. I had no regrets. What I felt was a strange, quiet sense of release. The splinter under my skin was finally gone. The ring was still in my pocket, but its weight felt different now. Lighter, like a burden I had been carrying so long that I had forgotten it was there. The doors opened onto the executive floor. The receptionist stood at attention. The corner office, Vivian's old office, now mine, waited at the end of the hall, its glass walls sparkling in the afternoon sun. I walked toward it, my footsteps steady on the gray carpet. I had the company. I had the patents. I had the power. And somewhere on the streets of Manhattan, Vivian Thorne was learning what it felt like to have nothing. The ring in my pocket was the final piece of the puzzle, the symbol of a love she had thrown away, and a revenge I had kept cold for 5 long years. I pushed open the glass door and stepped into my new office. The skyline stretched out before me, a kingdom of glass and steel. I sat down in the leather chair, the same chair she had occupied for a decade, and I swiveled to face the window. Far below, the streets teemed with tiny figures, each one chasing their own ambitions, nursing their own wounds, carrying their own invisible splinters. I took the ring box from my pocket and set it on the desk. I didn't open it. I just left it there, a small velvet monument to everything that had brought me to this moment. Then I picked up the phone and called Lena. Schedule a meeting with the transition team, I said. We have a company to rebuild. Outside, the sun began its slow descent toward the Hudson River. The office glowed amber and gold. And I sat in Vivian Thorne's chair, the chairman at last ready to begin the next chapter of a story that was far from over. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my new office, working through the transition documents with Lena. The sun slid lower over the Hudson, painting the skyline in shades of burnt orange and deep purple. By 6 o'clock, most of the staff had gone home. The executive floor was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the ventilation system and the occasional buzz of my phone. Then Lena walked in without knocking. Her face was tight, the way it got when something unexpected had happened. Chairman, you need to see this, she said, holding out her tablet. Vivienne just went live on social media. She's broadcasting from somewhere in Midtown. I took the tablet. The screen showed a shaky live stream, clearly filmed on a cheap phone. Vivienne's face filled the frame, her eyes wild and red-rimmed, her hair plastered to her forehead by a light rain that had started falling over the city. She was standing on a street corner. I recognized 42nd Street in Lexington, near the Chrysler Building. Behind her, neon signs flickered and pedestrians hurried past with umbrellas. "Hello, world," Vivienne said into the camera, her voice hoarse but steady. "My name is Vivienne Thorne. Most of you know me as the CEO who lost everything today.
What you don't know is why.
You don't know that the man who destroyed me, Lucas Grant, your precious chairman, was my fiancé 5 years ago. You don't know that he's been planning this revenge for half a decade. You don't know that he used his position, his power, every tool at his disposal to crush me for breaking his heart." She paused, wiping rain from her eyes. The livestream viewer count was climbing rapidly, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. "He says I'm a fraud," she continued. "He says I committed crimes.
But where is the proof?
Where are the charges? All has done is freeze my assets and seize my company based on his own authority. There's been no trial, no due process. Just one man with a badge and a grudge." Lena looked at me sharply. "She's trying to sway public opinion. The SEC charges haven't been unsealed yet. She knows the window is closing." I nodded, my eyes still on the screen. "Let her talk. She's digging her own grave." Vivienne's voice grew more passionate, more desperate. "I'm standing on the street right now with no money, no shoes and no home. Everything I built for 10 years was taken from me in a single day, by a man who used to kneel in a rundown studio apartment and beg me to marry him. This isn't justice. This is obsession. This is a man who couldn't handle rejection, so he spent 5 years climbing to a position where he could destroy me." The chat comments scrolling alongside the video were a mix of sympathy and skepticism. Some viewers posted crying emojis and hashtags like "Justice for Vivienne." Others wrote "Show the evidence," and "Where there's smoke, there's fire." I watched the numbers tick higher.
500,000 viewers now.
Vivienne turned the camera around, showing the rainy street, the indifferent crowds, the glow of the city that had once bowed to her. "This is what's left of me, a woman standing in the rain, begging for someone to listen. Lucas Grant wants you to believe he's a hero, but has not. He's a man who never got over me, and now he's using the power of an international regulatory body to satisfy his personal vendetta. If that doesn't scare you, it should. Because if he can do it to me, he can do it to anyone." The live stream ended abruptly. The screen went black. Lena took the tablet back, her expression unreadable. "500,000 viewers at the peak," she said. "The clip is already being shared everywhere. Some outlets are picking up the heartbroken ex-lover angle. It could complicate the SEC announcement tomorrow." I stood up from the desk and walked to the window. The rain was falling harder now, streaking the glass and blurring the city lights into soft smears of gold and red.
She is smart.
She knows the criminal charges will make her toxic, so she's trying to reframe the narrative before they drop. Make it about love and revenge instead of fraud and conspiracy.
What do you want to do?
Lena asked. I turned from the window.
Where is she now?
Lena tapped her tablet. Her phone signal shows her moving west on 42nd Street, probably heading toward Times Square. She's still live streaming sporadically, trying to build sympathy. I walked to the closet in the corner of the office and pulled out a black trench coat. I'm going to find her, Chairman. That might not be wise. If she's recording everything, any confrontation will be seen by millions.
Exactly, I said.
She wants an audience. I'll give her one. I took the private elevator down to the lobby and stepped out into the rain. Davis was off duty, so I hailed a cab myself. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes widening slightly as recognition dawned. "Hey, you're that guy from the news." "The chairman dude." 42nd and Broadway, I said. "And yes, I am." The cab pulled into traffic.
Rain hammered the roof.
My phone buzzed with a text from Lena. She just posted another video. She's at the red steps in Times Square. About 300 people have gathered around her. Some are supporters.
Most are just gawkers.
I typed back. Perfect. Tell the SEC to accelerate the unsealing. I want the charges public within the hour. The cab dropped me at the corner of 42nd and 7th Avenue. Times Square blazed with light even through the rain. The giant screens flashing advertisements and news headlines. And there at the base of the red glass steps above the TKTS booth stood Vivienne Thorne. She had gathered a crowd. Maybe 50 people surrounded her, holding up phones and recording her every move. She stood on the third step, her ruined suit plastered to her body, her bare feet blue with cold. She was speaking passionately to anyone who would listen, her voice carrying over the noise of traffic and tourists. "I built a company worth billions. I employed thousands of people, and one man, One man who couldn't accept that I chose my career over him took it all away in 24 hours. I pushed through the crowd. People recognized me and parted, their phones swinging in my direction. The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. It's him. That's the chairman.
Oh my god, he's actually here.
Vivian saw me approaching and stopped mid-sentence. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions: fear, fury, and then a strange, desperate hope. She straightened her spine and pointed at me dramatically.
There he is.
The man who destroyed me.
Come to gloat in person, Lucas?
Come to watch me beg in the rain?
I stopped at the base of the steps, looking up at her. Rain dripped from the brim of my coat. The crowd's phones formed a ring of glowing screens around us, capturing every word. I didn't come to gloat, Vivian, I said. I came to give you one last chance to tell the truth. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is that you're a bitter ex-fiancé who abused his power to ruin me. I shook my head slowly. The truth is that you defrauded investors out of $400 million. The truth is that you bribed a foreign official to secure a manufacturing license. The truth is that you stole trade secrets from 3 different competitors and buried them with lawsuits when they tried to fight back. The truth is that you treated every person who ever worked for you like disposable garbage. And when I was your driver, I was just one more piece of trash under your expensive heels. Vivienne's face twitched. That's a lie.
All of it.
I pulled out my phone and held it up so the crowd could see the screen. The SEC just unsealed the criminal indictment. It's 97 pages. Every charge is documented. Every piece of evidence is listed. The judge signed off on it 10 minutes ago. A murmur ran through the crowd. People checked their own phones. On a giant screen above Times Square, a breaking news alert flashed. SEC files criminal charges against Vivian Thorne. Her face appeared in a small box next to the headline, frozen in the exact moment she had realized the NextGen deal was dead. Vivian stared up at the screen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The rain plastered her hair to her scalp. Her bare feet slipped on the wet glass steps, and she grabbed the railing to steady herself. Lucas, she whispered.
Please.
I climbed the first step.
Then the second.
I stopped one step below her, so our eyes were level. The crowd pressed closer, their phones still recording. 5 years ago, I got down on one knee in a tiny apartment with a cracked floor and a Murphy bed, and I asked you to marry me. You said yes. 3 days later, you left the ring on my pillow and vanished.
You didn't call.
You didn't explain.
You just disappeared. Tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. I was scared. I was young. I chose wrong. I've regretted it every day since.
Have you?
I asked quietly.
Have you really?
Because 3 years later, when you interviewed me for a driver position, you looked me in the eye and pretended you had never seen me before.
You called me the help.
You made me pour champagne for your guests and then threw it in my face. You didn't regret anything, Vivian. You just forgot I was human. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the velvet box. The same box I had shown her in the lobby. The same ring she had left on the pillow 5 years ago. I opened it, and the diamond glittered under the neon lights of Times Square. I kept this, I said loud enough for the crowd to hear. Not because I still loved you, not because I wanted you back, but because I wanted to remember who I was before you broke me. I wanted to remember that I was once a man who believed in love and second chances.
You took that from me.
You took everything. I closed the box. Then, very deliberately, I tossed it into a nearby trash can. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Vivian made a strangled sound, half sob and half cry, and lunged toward the trash can as if she might dive in after it. But I wasn't finished. I turned back to face her. Now you know what it feels like. You spent 10 years throwing people away like they were nothing. Employees, competitors, me. Tonight I'm returning the favor. I stepped closer, my voice dropping so that only she and the nearest phones could hear.
You are nothing now, Vivian.
Not a CEO, not a billionaire, not a power broker. Just a woman with no shoes, no money, and a criminal indictment waiting for her.
And the worst part,
You did this to yourself. Every crime you committed, every person you crushed, every bridge you burned, it all led here, to this moment, to a rainy street and a trash can and a diamond ring you threw away twice. I straightened up and addressed the crowd. I'm Lucas Grant. I am the chairman of the Global Antitrust Committee. And whatever you think of my methods, know this. Every charge against Vivian Thorne is real. The evidence is public. The trial will be public. Justice will be done. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Vivian's voice rose to a wail. Lucas, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't look back. The rain fell harder, washing the city clean. I walked down 42nd Street toward the river, and the crowd slowly dispersed, their phones still recording, their social media feeds exploding with the confrontation that would be viewed hundreds of millions of times before the sun rose again.
My phone buzzed.
Lena again. The FBI just issued a warrant for her arrest. Agents are en route to Times Square now. She'll be in custody within the hour. And Chairman, well played. I put the phone away and kept walking. The ring was in the trash. The empire was mine. The woman who had broken me was about to face the justice she had evaded for a decade.
I should have felt triumphant.
I should have felt victorious. But what I actually felt as I walked through the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan was something quieter. Something that felt almost like peace. It was over. Finally. Truly over. 3 days later, I sat in the executive office of Thorn Industries on the 60th floor, watching the morning news on a wall-mounted screen. Outside, the sky was a crisp October blue, the kind of clear autumn day that made New York look like a postcard. Inside, everything had changed. The news anchor, a polished woman in a navy dress, spoke directly to the camera. Good morning. The business world is still reeling from the dramatic downfall of Vivian Thorn, the former CEO of Thorn Industries, who was arrested 3 days ago in Times Square on multiple counts of securities fraud, bribery, and intellectual property theft. Thorn is currently being held without bail pending trial. Meanwhile, her former company is undergoing a radical transformation under new leadership. Lucas Grant, the previously anonymous chairman of the Global Antitrust Committee. The screen cut to footage of me walking into Thorn Industries the previous morning, flanked by Lena and a team of attorneys. I looked calm and collected, a stark contrast to the disheveled Vivienne being led away in handcuffs that the network showed next. Grant has announced a comprehensive restructuring plan for Thorn Industries, the anchor continued. The company will divest from several controversial acquisitions, establish an independent ethics board, and cooperate fully with the SEC investigation into past practices. Grant has also pledged to personally oversee the repayment of all investors who were defrauded under Thorn's leadership. I muted the TV and turned back to my desk. The mountain of paperwork had not decreased in 3 days. There were contracts to review, employees to reassure, a company culture to rebuild from the ground up. The leather chair I sat in, Vivian's old chair, had been reupholstered in dark gray. I couldn't stand the cream-colored leather she had preferred. Too many bad memories. Lena knocked and entered without waiting for a response. Chairman, the press release for the restructuring is finalized. The board has approved all 17 appointments. And the Justice Department just called. Vivienne Thorn is asking to see you. I looked up sharply.
Shez in federal custody.
She doesn't get to make requests. She's been cooperating with prosecutors for the past 48 hours. They're offering her a plea deal in exchange for testimony against several other executives. But She's refusing to sign anything until she speaks with you, in person. I leaned back in the chair. Part of me wanted to refuse.
What more was there to say?
I had already said everything on the steps of Times Square, in front of millions of witnesses. But another part of me, the part that had kept that diamond ring for 5 years, wanted to hear what she had to say.
Closure, maybe.
Or just the satisfaction of seeing her behind bars.
Arrange it, I said.
1 hour, maximum security visitation room. No cameras, no recordings, no lawyers. Just me and her. Lena hesitated. That's a risk. Anything she says could be used to construct a narrative of personal vendetta. I've already told the world it was personal. There is nothing left to hide. 2 hours later, I walked through the metal detectors at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan. A federal marshal escorted me down a series of gray corridors to a small visitation room. It was sterile and cold, with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 plastic chairs. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I sat down in one chair and waited. 10 minutes passed. Then a steel door on the far side of the room buzzed open, and Vivienne Thorn walked. She wore an orange jumpsuit, the fabric stiff and shapeless. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup. Her blonde hair, once sculpted into perfect chignons, hung limp and unwashed around her shoulders. Dark circles ringed her eyes. She looked 10 years older than she had on the private jet. 48 hours and a lifetime ago. She shuffled to the chair across from me and sat down. A marshal handcuffed her to a metal ring on the table. She didn't resist. "Hello, Lucas," she said quietly. "Vivienne?" We stared at each other across the metal table. The silence stretched. "You wanted to see me," I said finally. "I'm here. Talk." She took a shaky breath. "I've been thinking about that night, the night you proposed." I didn't respond. I just waited. I told myself for years that I left because I was scared, because I wasn't ready, because my career needed to come first. She looked down at her cuffed hands. "But that's not true. I left because I thought I was better than you." I looked at that tiny apartment and that cheap ring and that man on one knee, and I thought, I can do better. I deserve better. So I walked out. Her voice cracked. I was wrong.
You weren't beneath me, Lucas.
You were never beneath me. You were the only person who ever really loved me. And I threw you away like a piece of trash. I leaned back in my chair. The plastic creaked.
Why are you telling me this now?
To get a lighter sentence? To make me feel sorry for you? No, she said, and for the first time, something like real honesty flickered in her eyes. In telling you because I want you to know that I understand. I understand why you did it. I understand why you spent 5 years building a trap and waiting for me to walk into it. I deserved it. Every bit of it. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden blade. I didn't find it. Maybe she was finally telling the truth. Maybe prison had a way of stripping away the armor. Or maybe she was just that good an actress. After 5 years, I still couldn't be sure.
The plea deal, I said.
Lena tells me you're cooperating. Vivienne nodded. I'm giving them everything. The bribes, the offshore accounts, the trade secrets, all of it. 3 other CEOs will be indicted because of what I've told them. It won't bring my company back, but it's something. It's not your company anymore, I said. I know.
She looked up at me.
What are you going to do with it?
Really?
I considered the question. She deserved a non-answer, a cold dismissal, but something about the sterile room and the orange jumpsuit made honesty feel like the only appropriate response. I'm going to turn it into something you would hate, I said. A company that treats its employees fairly. A company that competes ethically. A company that proves you don't have to be a monster to succeed in this industry. Every good thing that comes out of Thorn Industries from now on will be a repudiation of everything you stood for. She smiled faintly, a sad, broken expression. That's exactly what I would expect you to say. The marshal signaled that our time was almost up. I stood and buttoned my jacket. Vivienne looked up at me from her plastic chair, her cuffed hands resting on the metal table. Lucas, she said. That ring, the one you threw in the trash. Did you really throw it away? I paused at the door.
Yes.
I really did. She nodded slowly. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back.
Good.
You should have.
It belonged in the trash, just like me. I didn't answer. I walked through the steel door and let it close behind me with a heavy, final thud. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Somewhere behind me, Vivienne Thorne sat alone in an orange jumpsuit, staring at the empty chair across from her. The marshal escorted me back to the lobby. I signed the visitor log and stepped outside into the October sunshine. Davis was waiting with the Escalade. Back to the office, sir? I climbed into the back seat. No, take me home. I've had enough for one day. As the Escalade pulled into traffic, I watched the MCC building recede in the rear window. The last 5 years of my life had been powered by rage, a cold, patient fury that had kept me moving forward, climbing higher, building the trap that would eventually swallow her.
Now the trap had closed.
The rage had nowhere left to go. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the headlines. Every major financial publication had run the same story. Thorn Industries begins new era under Chairman Grant. The stock price had stabilized. The employee town hall I had held the day before was being praised as a model of corporate transparency. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the vengeful ex-fiancé.
I was the reformer.
The watchdog. The man who had exposed corruption and was now building something better in its place. At the penthouse, I changed out of my suit and into a simple sweater and jeans. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, the opposite of what Vivienne used to demand, and sat by the window overlooking Central Park. The autumn leaves were turning gold and crimson. Joggers traced paths along the reservoir. Life continued, oblivious to the empires that rose and fell in the glass towers above. My phone buzzed. Lena, of course. She never rested. Chairman, the final acquisition documents for the European division are ready for your signature. Also, the Times wants an exclusive interview. And the SEC commissioner called to personally thank you for your cooperation. Tell the commissioner Hayes welcome.
Schedule the interview for next week.
And send the documents over. I'll sign them in the morning. There was a pause. Are you all right, Chairman? You sound different. I considered the question. I'm fine, Lena.